30th anniversary year, so we're so pleased to have you here with us. Next year, we'll be in a brand new facility. It's 3 big halls, all combined in one. And if you notice down the hill from us, they've already started framing it up, so it should be a beautiful thing, and we'll have a brand new show with all our old favorites as well. Up next, we have a great speaker. He's got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to let him get to it. It's Jason Reeves. He is at UT Jackson. They've got a great festival in the summer. You should go visit. He'll probably tell you about that and also trips that he does. And I'm going to let him take it away. Thank you, Jason.
All right, we good to go? All right, guy from our sound check. Let's give the guys in the back a hand. They always do a great job with our sound and our audio visual. Thank you so much. Well, as Todd said, my name is Jason Reeves. I work for the University of Tennessee. If you're not familiar with what we do at the university horticulture-wise, we have 3 gardens, one in Knoxville on the main campus, on the ag campus near the vet school, one in Crossville at the Research and Education Center there, and one in Jackson where I'm located. Today we're going to talk about great garden plants with an emphasis on pollinators. Not everything we're going to talk about is necessarily a pollinator plant, but 80% of the things on here is. You do have 2 handouts. One of them is a slide that goes along with the slide presentation. And every plant I'm going to talk about is on this list. And then you also have one about some garden tours that Troy Martin and Lyndon Ron Hamilton and I are leading. And so you can take that information with you as well. I think Troy will be mentioning that a little bit tomorrow. So if you'd like to travel internationally or domestically to see gardens, that information there, and we'd love for you to join in on our trip. I think there's probably 15 or so alumni in here from some of our travels. So you've got that information in front of you. So just a little bit about myself so you know I'm really a gardener. How many people, this is the first time you've heard me speak? Maybe 20%. Wow, I got a big fan club here that's been in the past year, so that's great. Thanks for coming. So a little bit about myself. This is my front bed in my house. I live in Clarksburg, Tennessee, which is in Carroll County. It's about 45 minutes northeast of Jackson where I work. And this is my front bed. I love plants. I love all kinds of plants. I love mixing the annuals and the perennials, the tropicals and trees, shrubs all together. So you see a nice mix in these slides here. Love the look of the cannas, different year down the road, Thailand giant elephant ear, and I also love the winter beauty of the garden, and I like to include a lot of plants for winter interest as well, so you'll see those mentioned in this talk from time to time as well, and there it is in the summer a few years ago, so the boardwalk going down to the front of my house, and another winter shot of it, that same plant, that same silhouette in the wintertime. So see, there's a lot of interest there in the wintertime as well because I've chosen plants to catch that snow, not that we get much, but when we do. And then there's a shot out the front door. I love all living creatures. I love tree frogs. I grew up on a cattle farm. My parents built their house in the field. There were no trees around, didn't really have tree frogs. When I moved to this property 10 or 11 years ago, woods on 3 sides, and there's all kinds of tree frogs. So I really enjoy nature. And that little guy cute. So, and they like to watch me too. So they look in my front window and watch me cook at night. So, you know, nature is so amazing. This is a shot of Sarracenia at my house, and we've got this butterfly that somehow or another got trapped in the pitcher of the Sarracenia face down. And then we got this little tree frog here observing what's going on. Can you just imagine what's going on there? Just fascinating to me. So in here we've got the praying mantis and the tree frog carrying on a conversation. You can tell I'm a gardener. Look at my finger there. I'm not much on gloves. I put them on. They come off in about 10 minutes, and I forget where they are. Back to that Sarracenia. Here's a praying mantis having a butterfly for lunch. So it can be brutal. Love caterpillars. Here we've got a type of assassin bug actually sucking the life out of a monarch caterpillar. So, you know, it's this big circle of life. The stinging nettle. Again, you can see I'm a gardener there. Look how our stinging caterpillars, how my fingers are dirty there. You sure don't want to touch these saddleback caterpillars. They'll set you on fire. But many of the caterpillars are very friendly. I love monarch butterflies. I grow a lot of plants for that. We're going to talk about those today. I love wildlife so much, and the butterflies, and my friend Lisa, who's with me today, made me this caterpillar monarch cake for my 40th birthday party a few years ago. So it was chocolate on the inside. It wasn't green. So as I mentioned earlier, I work for the University of Tennessee at the Research and Education Center in Jackson. This is an aerial view about 10 years ago, so it's changed a lot since then. This is the day before our summer celebration where we have the tents set up. Summer celebration is mentioned on the back of your handout. It's the second Thursday in July. It's our lawn and garden show. attended typically around 2,500 people. We'd love to have you that day, but that information is all here. When I went to work there in 2012, I was the first horticulturist on staff there to develop the gardens. And it's a little over 600 acres, and most of the work is cotton, corn, and soybeans. And so this is what you see when you're there a lot. In the first year, I did this crazy installation in the garden with these neckties, and all those farm hands looked at me and like, what in the world is he thinking? Well, it's only gotten crazier through the years. So just a few themes through the years here I'll show real quickly with the bicycles hanging, painted trees, outdoor kitchen planted with heat-tolerant plants, sedums and succulents. Moving into the 70s with avocado green. And then most recently, about 4 years ago, the bottle wall with 1,000 bottles. So this is 1,000 wine bottles suspended from the structure we built in the garden. It remains in the garden today. So that year we had 6,184 bottles in the garden. We probably still have a little over 5,000 in the garden today. So there's an evening shot with the sun coming through the bottle wall. We built structures, all different kinds of structures for the bottles to hang from as well. So invite you to come out. The gardens at Knoxville, Crossville, and Jackson are open 365 days a year, daylight to dark, and they're free admission. Collectively together, we are the State Botanic Garden of Tennessee. So we invite you to come see our gardens. So what you're here today for to hear me talk about is plants that are going to attract bees and butterflies to the garden, pollinators to the garden. Again, most of the plants I'm going to talk about are going to do that. And we'll start out with annuals, and that's following your slide list here. If you have any questions, I'd appreciate if you hold it to the end because we're going to run out of time, I guarantee. I always try to pack a lot in. An annual is a plant that grows from seed and dies in the fall. So you start out from seed. It completes its life cycle in a growing season. So it goes from seed to seed. It does not come back from the root. Now the seed may fall on the ground and come back from the seed next year, but it completes its life cycle in a growing season. A great example of that is a marigold. A tomato is a good example. It dies at the end of the year. It does not come back from its root. So the first plants we're going to talk about are annuals. Flowering okra is an old-fashioned pass-along plant, Albomoscus. Wonderful plant getting about 6 to 8 feet tall in the garden with these beautiful hibiscus-type flowers. You know, okra, cotton are on the hibiscus family. Just a couple shots of it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about these plants. Again, we don't have time, but the sulfur butterflies really enjoy coming to the flowering okra in my garden. I save the seed. It has a pod very similar to okra, and I save it each year and replant it, or it self-sows as well. Celosia, an old-fashioned plant. I grew up taking coxcomb, the big cone-shaped ones, to the county fair, my grandmother's McCoy vase, and winning blue ribbons. Well, there's all different kinds of celosia. This is the plume-type celosia. Celosia is a great pollinator plant. The beneficial wasps are really attracted to celosia. A lot of those will reseed in the garden for you. If they reseed more than you want, they're easy to pull up. This one on the list is the Fresh Look series. It comes in several different colors. Just a couple shots of it. This is one that reseeded into my garden a couple years ago. Here combined with zinnias. So all the celosias, doesn't really matter which one, they're all really good plants for attracting those pollinators. Also really good cut flowers in the garden. Here again, late in the season, this is before frost, where it reseeded in my garden from the previous year. So I'll look for the celosias. In the background, here's a new one, an All-American Selection winner. All-American Selection is a nonprofit organization that promotes good quality seed-grown plants across the United States. So in the background here, you'll see this Asia garden. It's a wheat type. So picture a head of wheat. So it's tall and slender. The flowers are on it. So it's a wheat type celosia, getting about 4 feet tall. And again, those beneficial pollinators, especially the beneficial wasp, and of course the bees are attracted to it. So really good for attracting those pollinators to the garden. I love ornamental peppers. Ornamental peppers are not necessarily a great pollinator plant, although a bee or a butterfly or a wasp has to come along and pollinate it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the fruit. This is sangria. Sangria is a chili pepper, but it's a non-hot chili pepper that was bred for Walt Disney World. Been on the market now probably close to 10 years. I love sangria because it holds its fruit up high, so it's attractive, not hidden by the foliage. Starts out green, then turns purple, orange, and then maturing to red later in the season. So you can save seed from your ornamental peppers. A lot of them are hybrids and they'll kind of eventually revert back to what they started from. If you're saving seed of ornamental peppers, you want to be careful. Most of them are hot. You don't want to touch your face after you've touched the pepper itself, or wear some gloves. So keep that in mind. In with that picture, back up there, is Zinnia Zowie Yellow Flame. here's a couple shots of it. It's, again, an older All-American selection winner, but a really good zinnia. You know, large flowers make it easier for larger insects, such as the butterfly, to land on to get the nectar from. So that's zinnia zowie yellow flame. Those pictures there. It's the skipper butterfly on it. Back to the pepper. This is Sedona Sun. Smaller peppers about the size of the end of your finger again, but they're held up above the foliage, looking really great mid and into the fall in the garden. Like a little bonsai, a little flat top bonsai in the garden. So Sedona Sun. And then the zinnia Zahara. This is Zahara yellow. There's a Profusion series and Zahara series of zinnias that are very compact. They're about the size of a French marigold, maybe 18 inches by 18 inches. They're crosses between the tall zinnia and a little Mexican zinnia, a little narrow leaf one. They're not great for cut flowers because they are short. They have short stems, but they actually grow above the old flowers, so you don't have to deadhead them. These have been on the market now 10 or 15 years. Some of these seed-grown things are a little harder to find at the nursery. If you ask for them ahead of time, they'll try to grow them for you, or you can order the seed. Of course, zinnias are very easy to grow from seed. Order the seed off line or catalog. So if you're looking for zinnias that you really want to attract the pollinators, you really want these single forms. If you look here, this double, there's not as many fertile parts of the flower there is on these single flowers. So there's more there to attract the pollinators to the garden. So again, if your goal is getting the pollinators in, look for the single flower zinnias. And there's the double Zahara. Gomphrena globe amaranth is an old-fashioned plant. This particular one called Fireworks has been around maybe 10 years now, and Fireworks gets its name because if you look at it, it looks like there's an explosion happening. Fireworks, instead of a typical Gomphrena, which is more or less the center here, you've got these other pieces and parts coming off the side. If you look at this, the flower is actually the little yellow and the little white bits on the end. The purple part is actually the corolla. It's more like a petal that's been formed, and the sexual parts are on the tips, and that's where your pollinators are going to come to. This is a standout in the garden late in the season when it's really hot and dry, doesn't mind the heat at all, and those pollinators will be all over it. Here it is in my house about 7 or 8 years ago where it reseeded. It almost got so big it could be a privacy screen there. So it does reseed in the garden. A new cultivar that came out last year, and it's on your list, is called Truffula Pink, and it's from Proven Winners. Truffula is a vegetative produced form, so it's not grown from seed, it's grown from cuttings. You would have to buy a plant in a nursery. It is patented, so that nursery would get those plants in or the plugs in from a licensed propagator. So it's going to be in that white, most likely that white Proven Winner pot. It's more compact. It starts blooming a lot earlier in the season, and it also doesn't reseed in the garden. So if you're wanting one more compact, starts blooming earlier, you can look for Truffula Pink. So it was trialed last year. It just hit the market this year, so it may be a little bit difficult to find this first year. But again, great for the pollinators. Also makes a good cut flower. Also dries. It really more or less is dry as it grows, so you don't have to do anything special to preserve those flowers. The guy here that's got the dried pressed picture frames and the several buildings over has got several different examples of Gomphrena that look really great where he's pressed. And there's another skipper on the flower there. Lantana. How many people have not grown lantana? Anybody not? A few hands. Oh my gosh, lantana is a fantastic plant. It's one of those plants that is extremely drought tolerant. You can plant it out with a mailbox, water it maybe when you check the mail 2 or 3 times the first week, and then forget it the rest of the year. Tough plant, extremely drought tolerant. Also good for attracting the pollinators to the flower. This is Luscious Lemonade. There's a whole series from Proven Winner called Luscious. They're listed here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but a very drought-tolerant, durable plant. There are a couple hardy forms I do not have on your list, so you might want to write these down. The perennial forms of lantana are Miss Huff, and Ham and Eggs. Miss Huff is orange and yellow with a tinge of pink, and Ham and Eggs is pink and yellow. Now, they are perennial. They must be spring or early summer planted. You can't plant it in the fall and expect it to come back. They do die to the ground in the winter, and they must be planted in really good draining soil. If it doesn't drain well in the wintertime, the roots will rot on those perennial lantanas. So very important to remember that. Just quickly, I'll run through a couple of these. Marmalade. Also, the hardy lantanas get big. The first year, they're probably going to be 2 or 3 foot, but they'll eventually be 3 to 4 foot. Again, they die to the ground, come back every year, but the clump gets bigger each year. Cassia lady. Anybody growing this plant? few hands go up. I know some of you bought them from our plant sales in Jackson. If I have time, I'm going to mention the plant sale here at the end of our talk. So this is candlestick tree. This is my mother's house in Huntingdon. It is a tropical annual. You grow it from seed or you buy a plant. It dies at the end of the year. It does not come back. Rarely, our growing season is long enough for those seed to mature. So typically I order seed in from California each year. You have to nick the seed. You soak the seed in water and you say a little prayer when you plant them and hope they come up. They're not easy. That's why when you see this plant for sale, it's not the cheapest plant on the market, but we sell them typically for $5 in a quart pot. It is closer, it's a legume. If you're not familiar with legumes, they have, let me jump ahead. I thought I had it in order, guess I don't. Well, it's not, well, you can kind of see here, it's a pea-shaped bloom, and also the foliage, a lot of legumes have a leaf that kind of folds up. If you think about a soybean field, in the daytime, a bright sunny day, the soybean field is more of a green color. In the evening, if you notice the soybean field sort of has a blue cast to it. It's because the leaves have folded up a little bit and you're seeing the back side of the leaf, which is more blue. So this plant's leaf actually closes up in the evening. That's not real fast. You're not going to sit there and watch it, but it's neat to show kids open and 5 minutes later come back and it have be closed up. So here's the flowers. Doesn't bloom till late in the season. You see some seed pods forming. Again, rarely do they make seed that mature in our climate. There it is at my mother's, a different year. She has the best planting every year because I think it's planted right near the curb of her driveway and it gets all this radiated heat. It loves it hot, grows fast. It ends up being about 8 to 10 feet tall. We typically have to stake them, especially if you're in an open area where there's a lot of wind, they will blow over. If you're familiar with castor bean or mole bean, it grows that quick. You're planting that plant and it jumps. And at the end of the year, it dies. I like this plant for multiple reasons. Here it is in front of our bottle wall before it started flowering. There it is in flower. So I love it for the flower. I love it for that big bow foliage. And think about taking a quart pot that's cost you $5. At the end of the year, you've got a plant that's nearly 10 foot tall and 6 or 8 feet wide with all these beautiful flowers. But another reason to grow it is for the sulfur butterfly. The sulfur butterfly larvae feed on the foliage. So if you look at the sulfur here, here's the butterfly egg where it's laid it. If you watch the slide here, there's the egg on the leaf. This is at my house 2 years ago. Came back 2 or 3 days later. You can see it started feeding. That's the same branch coming up there. Couldn't find the caterpillar. The next day I found the caterpillar. It's not the most attractive caterpillar. It's about 3 inches long. Because it's green, it blends in. Sometimes it's hard to find. And so it will defoliate, it's eating the foliage. And then I was lucky this last year to actually find a chrysala. So it had climbed over to my spigot. You see the water hose here, and started the metamorphosis process here. So the chrysala was hanging there. To be honest, I had to Google it. I wasn't sure which caterpillar it was, but I Googled sulfur, and sure enough, that was it. And so, of course, the process repeats itself. So wonderful plant to grow for that, attracting that sulfur butterfly to the garden, but also for those beautiful flowers. And it's just a fun plant to have in the garden. Next plant on the list is Kufia. You may not be familiar with Kufia, the word Kufia, but you're probably familiar with Mexican heather if you've been gardening very long. Mexican heather was very popular 10, 15 years ago. It's still available, not quite as popular, but that's a genus of Mexican heather. Mexican heather is not related to heather at all. Totally a misnomer. This is Kufia batface, and it gets its common name from the petals here. So the petals on the flower look like ears of a bat. Sometimes I see it called tiny mice, but batface is the old-fashioned name. So collectively, these petals and the sexual parts here of the flower, again, look like a bat. Here at my house, I use it sometimes in the ground. It can be planted in the ground. Also works really well in pots. Here in the parking lot, it works surrounded by asphalt and concrete, so very heat and drought tolerant. Again, remember, we're under annual, so it does not come back. So you're going to have to buy a plant each year. This is one you can't grow from seed or not easily. But just a great performer in our hot, dry climate. Also works great in containers. Here are the pots at my house. And that leads me to talk about pots, to go off on a tangent just a minute. I love growing things in pots. And I like really big pots. I like pots big enough that I can take a nap in them. So just a little bit about pots here. This is part of my pot collection. I call myself a potaholic. My collection's grown probably 25 or 30 more since this slide was taken. Most of these pots are terracotta or glazed pots. They're stored in the wintertime. I don't leave them out in the elements. It is quite a job, and I hire usually my sister or somebody to help me do that, but I'm very passionate about my containers. So a couple companion pots I got a few years ago. There's that same pot planted up. I like to try a pot out for size before I put a plant in. This DeGroot spires that sat on the corner of my deck had outgrown the pot, this fiberglass pot, and I moved it into this nice plastic pot. There it is. Sometimes I even, excuse me, I like my plants to get to know each other before they actually become are installed in a container. So here's my deck with the pots sitting on there, filled with potting soil, plants setting around. I may do that for a couple days and find out, do they like being beside each other? Do they work together? And then I install them. Here it is, the same year, a little bit later in the season. Another shot. Here's a couple shots from last year. Begonia vine, Rex begonia vine, I'll mention a little bit later, is a fantastic plant. So back to Kufia. Sorry I had to get off on a tangent there just a minute about containers. So the Kufia, again, Mexican heather, if you're not familiar with the genus Kufia, is a type of Kufia, is a great pollinator plant. Very drought tolerant, drawing those bees into the garden. There's Mexican heather. Floridae, I just went blank. There's a new cultivar on your list. Flora Diana is a new cultivar of Mexican heather Kufia that's on the market with a little bit larger flower. Next on your list is one called Starfire Pink. Sometimes you'll see it listed as Twinkle Pink. It's a beautiful pink Kufia. Again, bringing those pollinators in. When a flower has a corolla that's so long that the bee can't get its proboscis, its mouth part in, it will oftentimes cheat. So I'll actually stick it, it's a needle-like, it will stick it in the back of the flower and suck the nectar out. So it's not pollinating the plant by doing that, because the sexual parts are down here. It's not getting the pollen on it, but it's drawing the bees into the garden. So it's still a great thing. So this is the Starfire Pink. And then new to the market about 3 years ago is Vermillionaire. Anybody growing Vermillionaire Kufia? Isn't it a fantastic plant? Oh my gosh, it is incredible. It's sold as an annual, but it's been hardy for us since we first trialed it in Jackson since 2014. So I'm going to tell you quite a bit about Vermillionaire. I'm actually writing about Vermillionaire for Fine Gardening Magazine. I think it'll be in the July issue, so you can read even more about it when it hits the newsstands. But common name for Vermillionaire is called a firecracker plant, sometimes called cigar plant. Vermillionaire, again, attracting those pollinators in the garden. You see those sulfur butterflies that's come to it in my garden. But also great for attracting the hummingbirds to the garden. So great hummingbird plants. So again, if you look at the tag in Tennessee, you look at the tag, it's going to say annual. Unless you're in upper East Tennessee, it should be hardy for you as long as you're planting in a good draining soil, not wet in the wintertime. Ends up being about 18 inches tall in the garden, about 12 to 14 inches wide. If you'll pinch it, it'll be even bushier. Go back to that. Nice shiny leaves, very drought tolerant. All your Kufias are very drought tolerant once you've got them established in the garden. So if you could only grow one Kufia, I would suggest you go out this year and look for Vermillionaire and put it in your garden. Works great in containers as well. On to some a butterfly plant that's going to attract the monarch caterpillars in your garden is Asclepias. Asclepias is a genus of butterfly weed. There's all kinds of butterfly weeds. Our most common one in Tennessee, our most common native one, is tuberosa, and I'll talk about that a little bit. That's a perennial. We'll talk about it when we get to perennials. This is an annual. This is the hairy ball plant, the swan butterfly weed. Goes by a whole different name, balloon plant, a bunch of different names. It's Asclepias physocarpa, and you're growing it for these interesting seeds that you see, but also for attracting the monarch caterpillars. The flowers are white. They're not extremely showy, but you end up with, again, those seed pods. They're very decorative. High-end florists sell these. They strip the foliage off and just sell the stems of this to go in arrangements as well. It does have a milky sap, as all Asclepias do, so it can be sticky on your hands. And, of course, attracting those monarch butterflies in the garden where they lay their eggs and the caterpillars feed on the foliage. So you can see this guy here, it actually chewed the stem into and the flower, it actually hanging down there. And then the next butterfly weed on your list is Asclepias carbasica. It's called tropical or annual butterfly weed. Again, it's grown from seed, or it will reseed. It does not come back from the root. There's some controversy over this particular plant. I'm not going to get into that. If you lived in Florida, we'd be talking about it. We're in Tennessee, different state, different issues here. But great, again, for attracting those monarchs of the garden. You can see here at my house where it totally defoliates. The tropical species or the annual species will rebound quickly. It'll put out a new flush of growth. Unfortunately, our native species don't do that, or are very slow, and so the caterpillars run out of food. So I grow both in my garden, our native perennial ones and then the tropical annual ones as well. Look at all the pollen on the back of its wings here where it's brushed up against the flowers. Isn't that cool? So you saw this slide earlier. So when a monarch eats all the foliage off a plant in the garden and there's no more, I try to go find another plant. So here's what I'm doing with this plant. This is a tropical milkweed relative we had one plant of. We didn't want it eating it up. So all last year, my friend Lisa here helped with that. Who works at the university with me. We would gather these and we would take them over to other milkweed plants. So you can move them around as long as it's on a milkweed plant. So when they run out of food, or again, they're eating your favorite milkweed, move it over to another plant. Again, the same process here. We're moving it actually up to our native species here of tuberosa. And oftentimes they're so hungry, they'll start feeding before they leave your hand. You can see I've moved it overhead, ran out of food on that particular plant, and I've moved up to another plant and it just started eating right away. So obviously monarchs are very pet friendly. You can touch these appendages, they won't hurt you. Aphids can be a problem in all your milkweeds. Obviously, you don't want to spray a plant with an insecticide or pesticide if you're going to, encouraging the pollinators in the garden. I like to squish as many as I can, but also taking a stream of water and kind of blasting the aphids off. The unfortunate thing about that is a lot of times they're tiny little. Look how little this guy is. I mean, he's like 1/8 of an inch. So it's hard to see those little guys, and oftentimes when you take a stream of water with a water hose, you'll knock those little ones off, and they're so small they won't recover. But if you let the aphid population build up as bad as it is right here, it's really hurting the plant as well. So it's a little work involved in that. You may not have aphids every year, but some years you're going to, and you can deal with that or let nature take its course. Look at this little guy here. Isn't he tiny? So last year, I actually ran out of food at my house. I probably had 40 or 50 different butterfly weeds. I ran out of food, so I gathered them up and I took them to work where we had a whole lot more butterfly weeds. So I'm putting them in this ice cream bucket, transported them 40 miles away to the Asclepias plants there. But I couldn't stand the idea of these dying. And my friend, my coworker Richard and his daughter Aniston helped me. They met me at the gardens that evening, and we put them on the butterfly weeds there. So getting the children involved, getting them excited about being out in the garden and explaining things to them is so much fun. And Aniston loved it. At first she was a little squeamish, but right away she was having fun with it. So here we're moving them around. Back at my house, the chrysala of the monarch butterfly. The chrysala on the monarch always has some gold around. It's kind of hard to see there. I have no idea why they like this water spigot. If you look down, there's some water droplets because it leaks a little bit. It gets a little shower, so maybe it cools it off. Who knows? But they do like that spigot. Caterpillars rarely do their metamorphosis on the plant they're feeding on for a couple reasons. One is another hungry caterpillar may come along and eat that. So they move over to another plant. Here on Canna's at my house where they've moved over. At work, they cross the parking lot. They climb up the gazebo in the shade garden and go up to the top of the rafters and do their thing from the rafters. And we're talking like 30, 40 feet away from the milkweed plants. So I feel like we need a caterpillar crossing sign because it's right through the parking lot. Here's one, it's about to hatch when you can see that it's transparent, you can see through it. And I just happened to catch this one over a couple days outside my office window a few years ago. There's the chrysala here where it came out of. When a butterfly hatches, you do not want to touch it. You want to leave it. It has to hang down for the fluid to pump its wings, for the fluid to be pumped through its wings, and then the wings harden. So it needs to be where it can hang. Again, you don't want to touch it. I always feel sorry. Every once in a while, you'll see a butterfly with crumpled wings, and I just can't stand it. I usually put it out of its misery because if it can't fly, obviously, it can't get around to get nectar. One pest besides the aphid that I think is fun and friendly but can get overpopulated is the tussock moth. The tussock moth caterpillar also feeds on the milkweed foliage, and they can really overpopulate. So you can see here they're down to this branch, and they're just eating away on what's left of this particular branch. And they will defoliate a plant, and you still got monarch caterpillars. And here they're fighting it out on the milkweed together. And that's what it looks like. So who am I going to choose? Sorry. I take my hands and squish, squish, squish. So I don't do that until they're overpopulated. But if I'm running short on food, these guys lose out, unfortunately, because it looks like that. It's another brown moth. A couple years ago on my deck, I was seeing this caterpillar poop, and it took me forever to find the caterpillar. Turned out to be a tomato hornworm eating on a million bell, or calibracoi, if you're familiar with calibracoi, a million bell. I wouldn't have thought about it at first, and I got to thinking about it. Tomato hornworm feeds on tomatoes, which is in the Solanaceae family. So is calibracoi, so is petunias. They're all in the same family. So it was feeding on that. Well, I decided not to kill it because you know what that becomes. That becomes your hawk moth that comes and pollinates your moonvine or your datura or your brugmansia in the evening. So you don't want to kill all those if you're growing tomatoes. You leave a few because you want that moth to come into your garden in the evening. So I actually moved it over to a big patch of petunias in the garden and let it keep going. Now again, if the population builds up, I would take care of some of those. Again, finding out, there's no leaves left on this Asclepias. Thankfully, because this is a tropical and it rebounds quickly. Just want to mention here the difference between monarchs. So this is a monarch caterpillar. You see it's got these four black appendages, 2 on each end. They're very friendly. They wiggle kind of like an antenna on a snail. You don't have to worry about touching them. They're not going to hurt you. And then this is one of the swallowtail caterpillars. So it can look a little bit different if you haven't really looked at caterpillars before, but the easy way to tell the difference is, again, you got 4 black appendages and the swallowtail does not. When you pet the back of a swallowtail, if you were to pet it, it puts out these stink horns. And they're orange. Again, they're kind of gelatinous like a snail, and they emit this stench. And that is intended to deter a predator from eating it. So if you were a little bird and you came along and you pinched his back and it stuck out these horns and it smelled bad, hopefully you would let go of it. So that's the idea, but that's an easy way to tell them apart. Here I'm teaching Anderson at work how to pet, and you can actually see it's beginning to put out those little stink horns. So you just gently rub its back, and it will put out those little horns. So easy to tell the difference between the swallowtail with the orange horns and the black from the monarch. All right, moving on, herbs and vegetables. Just want to mention a few here real quick. Great herbs for attracting the pollinators are parsley. Parsley is good for the swallowtail. So parsley, dill, rue, and fennel are great for attracting the swallowtails of the garden. And there's all different kinds of swallowtails, and I'm not going to get into those today. We don't have time for that. But including those herbs in your garden, here we got a couple mating. The swallowtail caterpillar feeding on dill, fennel. Bronze fennel's great. Bronze fennel's a good reseeder in the garden. Rue, I like rue for attracting that, but if you haven't grown rue before, you got to be very careful. Rue has the sap out of it can cause contact dermatitis and actually cause blistering and scarring. So not everybody's allergic to that, but a lot of people are. So you ought to be cautious if you're growing rue. But again, the swallowtails are attractive. There's the swallowtail chrysalis. You can see there is the exoskeleton of the caterpillar where it shed as it went into its chrysalis. The skin from the caterpillar itself is hanging behind there. Here we've got another skin right here. There's the chrysalis. This had climbed over to my kufia. So, oftentimes hard to see these. I get on my hands and knees and look around sometimes, or while I'm weeding, and you'll run across the chrysalis in the garden. There's a lot there, you just don't realize it. I want to mention an onion here. This is not really a pollinator plant, but I want you to grow this onion. It's called Warrior. Warrior is an all-American selection winner. Again, it's on your handout here. It's grown from seed. If you've never grown onions from seed, I hadn't either until 2 years ago. You take this tiny little seed and you end up in about 3 weeks with this little thing that looks like a tiny little grass blade. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's never going to be an onion. Got to be patient. Of course, we're doing this in the greenhouse. I would encourage you to go out to your local nursery person and encourage them to grow it for you. But you end up with this bunching onion. They call it bunching, kind of like a green onion, that's really blue. This is a late season shot. It's hung out all summer long. When we first planted it in the garden, I thought, well, it's probably not going to last long in the garden. When it gets hot, it'll be gone. It is a vegetable. It's promoted as a vegetable, but I left it because we're a trial garden to see what it did. It hangs on all summer long. I've now started mixing it in with other plants just for that texture sticking up. Last year, we decided to put it in our containers in the parking lot with our calibracoi, our million bells, because those plants don't like to be overwatered. I needed something spiky in there, and I knew an onion would be very drought tolerant. And look at that. This is a September shot. Is that not incredible? So this is 3 little plants that came out of a 3-pack, put in the center of this pot. When I planted them, they were probably maybe 4 or 5 inches tall. They were a little floppy, so I actually staked them a little piece of a twig off a tree, actually. Staked them till they got some strength on them, and we just let them go as an ornamental. I have eaten a couple of them. You would need to eat them earlier in the season because they get strong as the season goes on, but look at that as an ornamental. So, you're kind of going both ways there, an edible ornamental in the garden. Also on that note is a fennel. This is fennel Antares, again, an All-American Selection fennel. And it's a bulbous fennel. Again, we were sent this a couple years ago as trial plant. I thought this will never work in the heat of West Tennessee because bulbous fennel doesn't grow here. Put it in the garden. It did really, really well. Look at these big white bulbs that you have. Very edible. It tastes like licorice. It's great stir-fried. It's great braised. It's great roasted in the oven. But it's also very, very pretty in the garden. So it's hard for me to actually harvest it and eat it because it's so colorful. Well, yes, ma'am. Also works great in containers as well. So look for this Antares fennel. This is easy to grow from seed, so you can grow this yourself real easy. The onion's going to be a little bit more challenging to grow unless you've got a greenhouse. You can't direct sow an onion seed very well. And then what happens, if you leave it alone, you let them, the swallowtail butterflies will come along and eat them. So again, you're providing food for that swallowtail caterpillar. I want to mention a vegetable onion. This is vegetable pepper. So it's an edible pepper, sweet sunset pepper. Great for those beautiful. This is all off one plant, or the same. All this comes off the same variety. So they start out green, they turn yellow, and then they mature to red. They get sweeter as they get red. These I harvested last year, processed. I was going to freeze them, so I chopped them up and froze them. So look for that pepper. On to tropicals. This is the begonia vine I mentioned earlier. I'm going to run through some of these a little quicker. Not a pollinator plant, but a great tropical vine. I know Robin Brown's here and Judy from More and More. They sell this plant at More and More Garden Center. So check it out. A good vine. I love this. It actually clings to my painted brick on my house. So there's just enough texture there. It's in a pot, in an obelisk, and then it starts running up my gutter, and then it just kind of clings along the brick. So real fun plant to have in the garden. Again, it's a tropical. You're going to have to replant it every year, replace it, or try to keep it inside. Papyrus. How many people are growing papyrus? There's King Tut and Miss Tut, or Baby Tut. Love papyrus. Papyrus is the plant you read about in the Bible, growing on the banks of the Nile River. They made paper from. It took Proven Winter, the big marketing company, to bring it to our attention by putting a name on it called King Tut. And here it is in a pot at my house. It will grow perfectly fine in a wet spot, but it grows fine in average garden soil as well. Again, a tropical, not going to come back in the garden for you. But look at that. This was a $5 quart pot I put in this pot in the spring. And look at what it gave me all summer long. There's my glider there that I can sit under, and this thing's towering above me there. So it's a lot of fun adding that texture to the garden. Here at Lewis Ginter a few years ago with the muhly grass down a planting there. So look for King Tut, Little Tut here at Chanticleer in front of the bottle wall in Jackson. So again, those were all little quart pots and went in the garden in the spring, and you end up with this big plant. You can dig it up and keep it inside or in the garage if you want to try to overwinter it as well. The dwarf version in my house in a pot last year. If you let it get dry, this is on the streets of Huntington last year in their planters. I used a couple in some pots. Got a little bit dry. You can see how crispy it got. This is the very same day, about 10 minutes later, I just cleaned it up and just thinned it out. So if it gets thicker than you want, you can also, let me go back to that. There it is. This is about 3 or 4 weeks later, got a little dry, and then I just went in and took some of that out. So I actually like it where you can see those stems better. So easy plant to grow. Those of you who've seen me talk before, I'm sure you've seen this slide 100 times and tired of looking at it. This is Thailand giant elephant ear. It's always a fun plant. We sell this at our plant sales. We grow it from seed. It does not produce that bulb like you'll see from the vendors here. Totally different plant. It's a fleshy thing. It's not a tuberous bulb. Different elevators are produced different ways. But it's a fun plant here at my house. Typically not hardy. This particular one's been coming back in my house for 3 years. I killed probably 10 years worth before that. I finally found this perfect spot that it comes back. Does get big in the garden. So we sell those again in our plant sale. All right, perennials. So a perennial is a plant that comes back every year, whether it's coming back from the stem or the root. A tree is actually a perennial because it returns every year. We think of perennials more as irises or dahlias, and those are perennials. They die down, they come back. So the next section here is perennials. Mentioned Sun King Aurelia. This is Troy Martin's in Prim Springs. Love Sun King Aurelia for that gold foliage. It does have a flower, but you're more or less growing it for the foliage. dies to the ground. It'll eventually be about 4 by 4 feet. Here it is at my house a few years ago. It needs morning sun and afternoon shade. Too much sun will cause it to burn. Too much shade, it won't stay green. So it needs some morning sun, afternoon shade. A couple years later at my house, unfortunately the next year the voles moved in and they ate it. So I do have a major vole problem living in the woods. There's the flowers. Again, you're not really growing it for the flowers. You're growing it for that foliage. So I have seen a few butterflies come to the flower on it. Here's a mass planting of it. So Sun King Aurelia, fantastic plant. White veined Dutchman's pipe, Aristolochia. Aristolochia is called pot vine or Dutchman's pipe. There's a lot of different species. This is a little ground cover type that only gets about 6 or 8 inches tall and will spread to about 3 feet across. And then the pipe vine swallowtail caterpillars are attracted to it. Again, it's a very petable caterpillar. It's like the monarch. It's soft-bodied. You can touch it. It's not going to sting you. They feed on the foliage. There's the flower on it. There's all kinds of pipe vines, Aristolochias. They're all great for attracting the pipe vine swallowtail of the garden. Here they are, of course, munching away. And then there's the swallowtail, the butterfly later. Of course, it's over here feeding on the nectar of the butterfly weed. So I mentioned our native butterfly weed earlier, Asclepias tuberosa. This is the one you're most common in Tennessee on the roadsides. You see they bush hog it down. It oftentimes will come back and be a little thicker and flower on the side of the interstate. So Asclepias tuberosa needs good draining soil, about 18, 24 inches in height, beautiful orange flowers, and of course attracting those caterpillars and butterflies to the garden. Here we're moving some around in the garden. For me, this is short-lived. I get about 3 or 4 years out of tuberosa, and then I have to replant it. But really good for, again, our native pollinators. And there's the seed pods on the Asclepias, a beautiful seed pod when the seeds are floating around, kind of like dandelion floating around in the garden. Of course, phlox is a really good pollinator plant, drawing all kinds of butterflies and bees in the garden. This is mini pearl. Mini pearl is a clumper, but the clump gets a little bigger each year. This is actually 3 clumps planted in the garden. This is a shot 6 or 7 years ago in the gardens in Jackson. Good to cut in arrangements as well, a little bit fragrant. If you'll deadhead this, give it a little jolt of extra fertilizer, water soluble or some sort, it'll bloom twice, sometimes even 3 times in the garden. Here I have mini pearl and wanda mixed together at my house. That's where that Sun King Aurelia was, so the voles ate it the year before. They have seeded around the garden and they're actually crossing. If you look, this white one has a little bit of a pink eye, so they're crossing with each other. So this is an early summer or late spring, early summer shot at my house. So that's wanda and mini pearl. Again, wanda is this one here. A little bit harder to find on the market, but a great phlox to have in the garden. Just a few more shots of it. Gina. Gina is the smallest flowering paniculata or garden phlox I've seen. It'll end up being about 3 to 4 feet tall, but the flowers are really small on it. The head itself is about the size of your fist. But if you have 20 different kinds of phlox planted, you'll see more butterflies on this phlox than any other plant in the garden. I think maybe because the flowers are small, maybe the nectar is more concentrated. I'm not sure what the reasoning is, but they love this plant. So look for Gina, if you're trying to attract the pollinators to the garden. Olive salvias are great for attracting the bees and butterflies and hummingbirds to the garden. This is Almstead. Almstead is similar to Salvia garnetica. You may be familiar with garnetica, black and blue. Almstead, to me, is a little bit better. It's a Southern Living plant, so if anybody carries the Southern Living brand, they'll be more likely to have it. The corolla is even darker, and the flowers are a little bit more purple than on black and blue, or is purple. Look at that sulfur butterfly, sticking its proboscis down in there to reach the nectar. Almstead is sowed as a Zone 8 plant, but it's been hardy. We've had it almost 10 years now in Jackson. So as long as it's in well-drained soil in the wintertime, it'll come back for you. A native, the last perennial on the list is an ironweed, Veronica lettermanii. This is native more to Arkansas. One of the common names, sometimes I see it, is Arkansas ironweed. This particular cultivar is called iron butterfly. This is at my mother's house in Huntingdon. I love this plant for its fine textured foliage, and then you have these beautiful purple flowers that come on a little later on in the season. It can be floppy, and I want to show you this slide to show you it is a native plant, again, to Arkansas. Needs to be planted in poor, dry soil. Don't plant it in a bed where you're irrigating. Don't plant it in a bed that you've heavily amended with organic matter. That makes it more floppy, and that's true for a lot of plants. So plant it in a poorer site, a drier site, and it won't do this for you in the garden. Again, all your ironweeds are great for attracting the pollinators to the garden. Just a couple vines real quick. Frohosh jasmine, you're really growing this for the gold foliage. It does have white fragrant flowers in the spring, but it doesn't produce for long or early summer. Doesn't flower for a long time, not as fragrant as your tropical jasmines. This is photos are taken in Knoxville a couple years ago in the gardens. Here at the corner of my pergola, unfortunately it died due to some problems with nematodes I have. But I love that plant for the gold foliage. In the wintertime, you have these beautiful gold stems left behind as well. So it's attractive during the winter months as well. I love to pair it with clematis raguchi, and this is raguchi here. Raguchi is a herbaceous clematis, meaning it dies flat to the ground in the winter. It's my favorite clematis because I don't have to tell people how to prune it. It dies to the ground. It comes back every year. But it is a clematis that needs some help. It doesn't twine like a lot of the other clematis, so it's best to plant it in with another plant and let it scramble up through it. And that's what we've done here. So these beautiful bell-shaped, kind of bluey purple flowers, and it will bloom all summer. It's going to put on a great big show early, and then it'll bloom some throughout the summer. Also works good hanging over a retaining wall here at my friend's house in Oak Ridge and Hensley, where she lets it spill over her retaining wall. Because again, it doesn't climb. To get it to climb, you got to give it some support or encourage it, so it will spill over a retaining wall. Last vine on the bottom of your page there is Virginia creeper. I never dreamed I'd be talking about Virginia creeper. You know, it's a native vine. It's great for actually a lot of predation, a lot of insects eat on Virginia creeper. But this is a variegated form called showstar or mohave. It's in the Monrovia lineup of plants. But look at that foliage. Fantastic. Every leaf looks a little different. Unlike poison ivy, it has 5 leaves. The way to remember if it's poison ivy or Virginia creeper is leaves of 3, leave it be. So if it has 3 leaves, it's poison ivy. You know, we don't have poison oak here at all. Poison oak grows on the other side of the country. It's confusing to people. But there it is, the Virginia creeper, good fall color as well. So variegated forms. All right, on the back of your list, shrubs. Vitex chase tree closely resembles the look of butterfly bush. There's several cultivars there I'm going to run through quickly. There's Big Guy, Shoal Creek, and there's a lot of new ones. They're great for attracting the pollinators to the garden, the bees and butterflies. Here's a new cultivar called Blue Diddley. It's a little bit more compact, still going to get big in the garden. And this is Blue Puffball, which is supposed to mature at about 4x4. Very heat and drought tolerant. Again, great for attracting those bees to the garden. When you think about hollies, this is an old Burford holly. You go to trim a holly when it's in bloom, oh my gosh, we don't realize that there's bees all in hollies when they're in flower. And so just want to mention a couple hollies here. This is our native winterberry holly. All hollies are male and female. You got to plant a male to go along with the female if you want flowers, or fruit, I mean. This is winter red. And this is winter gold. It's more of a salmon-y color. Again, this is on your handout. There's the winter gold. It's a deciduous holly. Leaves fall off in the winter. Native to the U.S. More so north of here, but a really good plant. If you look here, this is the male. The male doesn't have any berries on it. He provides the pollen for the female. The bee has to do its thing. It only takes 1 male for a whole bunch of females, so you don't have to have equal number. It's closely related to possum-aw holly. You may be familiar. That's the one you see more native here in Tennessee, which is a much bigger plant in the garden. There are a lot of different cultivars of winterberry holly. And I want to just throw this one out real quick. I think Robin's had this one more and more in the past. This is Woe Nellie. Woe Nellie is a gold form of Nellie R. Stevens. Look at this. Isn't it beautiful? This will be good in a privacy screen or as a specimen plant in the garden. This is the original plant from the University of Georgia in their gardens there. Love it for that gold foliage. Edgeworthia is blooming right now. Anybody got Edgeworthia going on in their garden? Isn't that a fantastic plant? Oh my gosh. Love the smell of Edgeworthia. There's quite a few here in the show. Edgeworthia have these beautiful blue-green foliage, water stems up on the leaves like beads of mercury. Flower buds form in the fall, and then it blooms in February, March, or April, depending where you live and depending on the season. Very fragrant, best in shade or morning sun, afternoon shade. The flowers don't mind a little bit of snow, a little bit of cold. If you get down to single digits, they may desiccate and fall off. They got this shot last year of the bee visiting the Edgeworthia, and look at the pollen sacs on it. It's really orange. Isn't that fun? So having things that bloom really early to get those bees something to feed on early is great. Rose of Sharon, a good bee plant. This is a new one called Purple Pillar. Purple pillar is a tall, slender Rosa Sharon. So Rosa Sharon is Hibiscus syriacus. You know, they're tropical hibiscus. They're hardy ones. Rosa Sharon is an old-fashioned plant, also called Althea. Purple pillar will end up being about 15 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. Blooms about 3 or 4 inches across. This is a shot of the gardens 2 years ago in Jackson. Again, 2 years ago in Jackson. You see it's narrow, planted in the front of the building there. Fantastic Rosa Sharon. Not promoted as being sterile, as some Rosa Sharons are, but we've yet to have a seedling come up from this. So it must not be too fertile or there would be babies coming all up around it, which can be a problem with Rosa Sharon. So purple pillar. Next plant, great foliage plant, can be used as a foundation planting, not a pollinator plant, but Alyssium parviflorum Florida sunshine. You see where it gets its name. It glows in the garden here at my mother's house several years ago with the sun hitting it. It does best if it's got to have some sun. If you plant it in full shade, it gets a little ratty, can get a little bit muted in color. And originally we thought they needed some shade. Now I'm seeing them growing in full sun and doing quite well. Here's my mother by hers last winter. So it looks like this in the wintertime as well. Her house is planned in morning sun, afternoon shade. It's on the east side of the house and it's done fantastic. So Florida sunshine Alyssium, also tolerant of wet soil, not necessarily standing water, but moist soil. So you got a site that's a little bit challenging. This would be a good plant for that. Also, I didn't mention the winterberry holly. That deciduous holly will also grow in wet soil. So if you got a spot you're having trouble with because it's wet, that winterberry holly would be a good choice for that. In the winter times, the stem turns this pinky color, so it adds to the plant during the winter months. Here's one in near Athens, Georgia, growing in full sun, and this is what encouraged me to plant some in full sun. It does fine in full sun, as long as you can give it a little bit additional water. It's going to be a little bit more compact, but again, Florida sunshine. I love gold plants. This is the old-fashioned bridal wreath spirea, but the cultivar called Ogun. You know, Ogun just means gold. A lot of plants with a cultivar called Ogun. So this is Spirea thunbergii Ogun with a Zhuzhou fuchsia, which is a big loropetalum. Zhuzhou fuchsia loropetalum. It'll get 15 feet tall in the background. Love that contrast in foliage color and texture. This is my mother's house again, Spirea. This Spirea blooms early. It's actually in bloom right now. Of course, we've had a little warm spell. So it blooms early each year. Then you have the beautiful billowy gold foliage through the summer. And then you also have really good fall color. Sometimes this fall color hangs on until December. And I'm like, it's time to be done with the orange now. Drop your leaves. So you really have you have at least 9 months of beauty out of this because it blooms early and then that fall color lasts late in the season. So a great Spirea. Also goes with the name mellow yellow sometime. Been around for quite a few years now. I know, I've seen this at more and more here in Nashville. There it is in the parking lot, one in bloom in the spring, and there it is with this fall color. All right, hydrangeas. I'm only going to mention a little bit about hydrangeas. But how many people were here for my hydrangea talk last year? From what I understand, we set record attendance for a talk here. It was crazy. So I'm just going to mention a couple, and it's all about pollinators. If you're looking for a hydrangea to attract the pollinators of the garden, you don't want to buy a limelight. Limelight has all these beautiful white, limey green, infertile flowers. There's no pollen there. Very little in those. If you're wanting to grow, again, for the pollinator, you want to look for one that's more open in habit like this. And so I've mentioned those on here. Well, yeah, quickfire, little quickfire, baby lace, tardiva, pink diamond, pinky winky. There's more of those. But when you go to the nursery to buy it, look for one with a more open panicle because these are the fertile parts. If you look right here, you can see the stamens. And then these are the petals, modified petals that are infertile. So you want more of this to attract the pollinators to the garden. There is quickfire again. This is baby lace. This is Michael Durr's introduction, Gardener's Confidence. So more open habit, flower again, room for the sexual parts, the bees and the butterflies to come to that. And then with the macrophyllus, which are your French type or mop head type hydrangeas, you want to look for, again, that open habit. And this is one called Twist and Shout. Twist and Shout's a lace calp. And so, again, there's more fertile flowers there. Look at the bee on it. So there's Twist and Shout. Twist and Shout's one of my favorite lace calps that you can grow. It's an Endless Summer series. And then Tough Stuff, also the Tough Stuff series is a lace calp that will attract those pollinators. Just a couple trees real quick and we're going to finish up. I'm sure in 1950 when these folks built this house in Middle Tennessee, they had no idea those arborvitaes were going to get that big. Isn't that fun? I love this. I was driving down the road and did this U-turn to get the picture. And, I love the added of the Cadillac in the carport there. We don't know what these are, but if you want something tall and slender like that, you can plant DeGroote spire. So again, not a pollinator plant, but a solution plant. If you've got a problem, you've got a tight spot, need something tall and slender, look for DeGroote spire. Here it is in my house in the pot. I used to get on a ladder and decorate it for Christmas. Now I just lay the pot over and take it for a ride and then stand it back up. Jantar is a gold form of that. So if you're looking for a gold form, look for Jantar. A couple shots of it. Here it is in the wintertime. So again, tall and slender and gold. And then our native eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana Taylor. This is the Missouri Botanic Garden. Tall, slender cedar tree. Cedars grow on the side of the road. They'll grow anywhere. They're tough as nails, very drought tolerant. Back in Jackson. And slender silhouette sweet gum outside of Nordstrom's at the Green Hills Mall here. Love this native found by Don Shadow here at the Indianapolis Museum of Modern Art with them in the landscape. There at the museum a year later and here a few years later in fall color. This is the original plant at Don Shadow's that they were all originally propagated off of. It does get some balls some years, but not every year. Here's ones at Jackson last year. So some balls, it's a narrow plant. The balls fall at the bottom. It's not hard to rake up. Otherwise, I'd never plant a sweet gum because I grew up with a couple of those on the farm that I hated. But I love that tall, slender form. And then oak, kindred spirit, jump through this, good fall colored, tall, slender oak. And we'll end with these last three trees. Back to pollinators. The redbud, Don Egoff, is a sterile form of Chinese redbud, so it doesn't produce those seed pods, flowers from the ground up, and great for the pollinators in the garden. White form of that's called alba. So these are Chinese redbuds. And the mimosa, controversial plant. I grew up planting a mimosa tree. There's no more mimosas on our farm than there ever was. They're short-lived. This is a chocolate, one called summer chocolate with that beautiful burgundy foliage. Butterflies, bees love this. You may not realize it because the flowers are on top of the plant, but if you get on your roof like me and look down, you'll see all the hummingbirds and the bees working the top of it. So I'm on my roof looking down on the garden. So I love it for that burgundy foliage and flower. And the last plant on our list is a ball cypress, a native plant. Again, not a pollinator plant, but a dwarf one called PV minaret that's fun to have in the garden because it is dwarf. You can make it even more dwarf. Here's the one in the gardens in Knoxville, about 8 feet wide, 20 feet tall. My friend Sandy Bound in Bowling Green. And in my house, I cut mine back to the trunk, the stems about every other year, and keep mine really a bean pole. There's that mimosa tree there. So a fun ball cypress to have in the garden. Please follow me on Facebook. You can go there with Jason Reeves Dash in the garden. That's my garden page. If you try to friend me on my personal page, I'm sorry, I'm not going to friend you. This is the page you can follow me on. Also the UT Gardens as well. All that's on the back of your handout here, along with our events coming up, our plant sales. 75% of the plants I mentioned here today is available at our plant sales, our spring sale, summer celebration, our field day, and then our fall sale, we will be having Don Shadow from Georgia as our fall speaker. So hope you'll come and see us. I think I'm out of time, so if you got questions, I'll be in the back. Thank you so much.